Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 259. I think this is our second episode of the new year, but this is kind of the first one where we've had I guess I'm not counting Corey as a guest because he's almost like sort of the third Artcaster.
Yeah, he's the third host.
That was sort of like a year-end wrap-up, but today we're getting back to topics, and it feels weird for me because it's been a while since I've hosted, so hopefully I'll remember how to do this thing, because the last one we did, Josh hosted, and then before that we took a couple weeks off or whatever. But we're back with a good friend. We're glad to see. We'll get to Mike in a minute. But first, we're going to do what we always do and just kind of tell everyone where you can find us. You're on my channel, so hopefully you know where to find me. Otherwise, you can also find me at circworks.com. I don't have that big sale going anymore, but I do have some stuff that is on a little bit of a sale on some of my digital products and everything. So definitely check that out. Other than that, I don't have anything really to promote so much. What about you, Josh?
Nice. So I am working on the second book of this two stories. And so two stories, book 2, I'm posting progress as I do it. Aiming to get it done in like a year and a half, which is kind of crazy because this took like 6 years, 5 years, something like that. But anyhow, so yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at, I always forget if it's Joshua or Josh. I think it's Joshua Kemble. And then you can also just, get links to everything and all that fun stuff at Quarterly Stories or joshuakemble.com. And then definitely go to Amazon, check out Two Stories. It's a comic about faith and mental illness. It's a memoir, and I'm pretty proud of it. And if you're into like black and white indies, I think you'd enjoy it. So far, every reader I've heard from really liked it. So
yeah, and I finished mine. I did finish it, and yeah, it's great. I'm kind of chomping at the. It's champing at the bit. I always thought it was chomping, but I guess it's champing at the bit for the next installment, because it does kind of leave on a little bit of a, not a cliffhanger, I guess, but just it's got a kind of a powerful ending that makes you kind of want to read the next section. So
nice.
Yeah, but I got to put up my review and everything. But man, just the way you constructed this. If you're a fan of comics, the way Josh constructs his story and his little the storytelling techniques that he uses, and the way he uses things, the form of comic storytelling, things you can't do in other media. He really takes advantage of that, and it's really amazing. And not to mention just the illustration and everything. So it's awesome. But
thank you.
But I'll put it all in my review when I get to it.
I'm fighting all my tendencies to want to fight that. I appreciate it.
And I did.
Did you see the inking mistake on page whatever? Thank you. That's cool.
And I also listened to the interview you did on the Live, Love, Learn podcast.
Read, Learn, Live. And I always get it wrong because learn and live, I don't know if it's like a dyslexic thing or whatever, but I flip live and learn. But it's with John Monaster, and it's an excellent podcast. Like outside of me, like it's just a good podcast to subscribe to. So if you listen to my episode and get bored, like check out the other authors interviewed on it. It's really good. So yeah.
All right. And as I mentioned, we got Mike back on the show. It's been a little while, but I'm just happy to talk with Mike. He's definitely an old friend, and every time he comes on, we have him on, fairly frequently. He's one of our more frequent guests, not a ghost.
Like a runner-up.
I'm always here.
Yeah.
But he's always got something new, and when I asked him to send me over some artwork for a thumbnail, and he sent me like 2 or 3 to 4 different designs, and it's like, wow, what do I pick? And just some really cool stuff. And so. We'll get into kind of what you're doing sort of with your continuing education and everything, but why don't you tell everyone where to find you?
Cool. Yeah, well, you can find me at sisypheancomplex.com. It should be up on the screen now, or Instagram is kind of where I post most of my stuff, and Patreon. So Patreon, I'm in and out once in a while kind of thing, but the more engagement I get on Patreon, the more active I am. just seems to make sense that way.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of breakdowns actually of like especially my coloring process, or like from sketch to finish on basically everything, all my commissions, all the more polished kind of illustrations. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I do a lot of that on there. And I try to get something out once every couple months, but it's it's the dollar tier, you get everything anyway. So, it is what it is. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. So when I reached out to Mike, I asked if there were, because this is the way we usually do things, is we ask if there's any topics or anything that you want to talk about as the guest host. And Mike said you're talking about, and I mean, you can elaborate on this, but you were talking about how you are taking some schoolism classes, and I always find Mike's sort of process very interesting. So
that's one way to put it.
yeah. And I mean, it's just fascinating. If you've ever seen, I mean, I don't know exactly where to point people to, but I've seen a few videos where he kind of goes into it, and it really is the way he goes about, learning and just, practicing art is pretty, it's pretty involved, and it's just contrary to what I do, but it's just fascinating to me. So I'm always curious about what you're learning and what you're trying to add to your art. And that's kind of what you were talking about today, is like, so you took a schoolism class. I'll just kind of kick it over to you, and you can kind of go into it. But you were talking about your schoolism class and what that kind of led you to the decision of what you wanted to talk about tonight.
Yeah, well, it's cool because like the funny thing is I did want to take a schoolism class. There was this whole kind of convoluted situation with trying to take that schoolism class because they've changed the way that their payment system and stuff works. So that kind of led me down this other route where I was talking to a friend of mine, Teresa, who also does schoolism, and I talked to her about yeah.
Okay.
She's awesome. We talk all the time. We're always
we've had her on the show too. So
it's
been a while. We gotta get her back. She's like one of the only, because if you haven't, and just a little aside, it's kind of a sausage fest when we do this show. We don't have to. And it's not for lack of trying. Honestly,
Sure.
we've reached out to a number of female artists, and for whatever reason, they just they either have other commitments or they don't want to do it, or it's too late. Yeah. And then. Well,
Teresa's like halfway through sleeping right now. She's on the opposite end of the globe.
I gotta get you never know, because but I just it's like she's like knee deep in like 5 kids books every day. So it's like hard to give her even a window, but we'll have to get her back on.
Yeah, you also never know because like Mike, who's in Chicago, we always worry about inviting people on that are on East Coast or whatever. And but Mike's like, I'll be on in a minute. I'm just eating dinner.
Yeah.
Midnight where he's at.
It is. It's 11 now.
Yeah.
That's how our life has been with the move and everything. It's just we're all upside down now.
Yeah.
Dude,
but I didn't mean to interrupt, Mike. Go ahead.
I ate lunch at like 3 p.m. today just because I had so many other things going on. And I realized it was late and I was getting crabby. I'm like, I bet you I need to eat. What time is it?
I'm on this diet right now where I'm just eating every 2 hours or so. So it's crazy. But,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like little meals? But
mostly there's snacks and things, and then there's meals and things, but they're smaller meals. But
Sweet. So how far are you into your like unpacking and stuff? Because that's crazy.
We're knee deep in the actual packing stage. We're not even unpacking yet. Yeah, we have 2 weeks left pretty much, and throughout that 2 weeks now, we're going to be showing the apartment, trying to get somebody to sublet our place, and moving and closing and all of that.
Wow, that's chaos, man.
Yeah, it's been fun. So now at random, people could show up at our place and be like, "Oh, we're just going to take a quick walk around." Like, okay, great. Well, I'm pooping, but come on in.
You're so talented. Have you gotten that? Like, while they're looking, if you're working on art, they're like, "You're so talented."
No, luckily I took all of my stuff off of the walls and stuff before anyone got it. So I don't want those conversations.
No.
Like, even our realtor heard that I was an artist because I'm talking about studios and stuff. She's like, "Oh, I got to see your art." I'm like, no, you don't have to though. Like, it's best we do this first, and then you can check it out later. I don't want you to think weird things of me. Well, especially where we're living now. We're down in central Illinois, so it's a bit of like a I don't know. It's very well, I guess blue collar, but that's not the word that I'm looking for, but wholesome. We'll say wholesome. And the stuff that I do isn't necessarily wholesome. Like the kind of art that they're looking for is like arts and crafts, country living, that kind of thing. And I definitely don't do any of that at all whatsoever. So
Well,
I get
the suburbs,
different reactions down here than back in Chicago.
Yeah, that's that's definitely, that resonates with me, because I'm definitely very similar to our situation here. So
yeah. It's fun though. I mean, I'm unique down here, I guess. So I was actually really looking forward to doing like the farmers markets this year, because I have some unique kind of things to bring to the table to sell there, which would be different from a comic convention where I'm like one of 1,000 other people, you know. Here I could bring something to the table that's different that they haven't seen, you know. So, but you know, COVID.
I know. I've been having similar things with the book where I'm like, I want to do a lot of stuff locally, and it's just like there's absolutely no way to do that right now.
What are you gonna do?
Like one of the best ways for indie creators to kind of compete, you know, because like we don't have the budget of like the giant, you know,
totally.
Mega,
you know, get on that local level, because there's so many different restaurants and stuff down here too that they like supporting local art, and they're into that. It's like a trendy thing. So we got the colleges down here and stuff, and so I was just starting to sow the seeds of that sort of thing, and getting some feedback from some business owners. But you know, now pocketbooks are a lot tighter. They don't have the kind of money to spend to take a chance on stuff. So, but I'm keeping positive. We'll see. You know, this is going to pass, and we'll either this year or the next year things will get somewhat back to normal. At least we'll have to, or they'll go completely in some other direction, and we'll see. I'll be wearing a Viking helmet, and you know, who knows what.
Oh, no.
Anyways, I digress. But Teresa, right? Schoolism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I threw you off track with that. That was good.
So yeah, well, it kind of has to do with it though. So, you know, because of how this year went, all my plans kind of got thrown up in the air. So, you know, my initial plan at the end of last year was get started on Cysteine Complex, get that first issue out, and go. I didn't have any other plan at all. But then all this happened, and that just dramatically changed. It was hard for us financially, just everything. I mean, for everybody. I'm not even saying I'm in a unique situation. I think everybody could relate to this. And well, plans changed, and suddenly there was a period where I was wondering, are comics even important right now? Like, where is this going? What's even happening? And so I kind of shut down for a while, and I had to start taking a lot of commissions too, to kind of help, you know, collect some money and help keep us afloat, save for this house, all that sort of stuff. So my gears just shifted. And my type of personality, whenever I'm in a rut, or whenever I haven't been kind of in my groove for a while, doing the things that I want to do, the best way to get back on track is to do some studies. It's to, you know, get back into school. It doesn't have to be literally, but metaphorically, you know, go and draw a bunch of hands, study faces, get a book, whatever, and just study. So that's kind of where that started. Not necessarily in a funk, but I felt the need, like I needed to get going again. You know, I'd put this off long enough. Let's jump back into it. So I started looking into schoolism, and because I love schoolism, I've tried a bunch of the other places, and this isn't a plug for them at all. This is just an opinion. I just like them the best. I think they have the best structure, because you can be knowledgeable, you could have the skill, but teaching's a whole different thing. And I feel like schoolism finds people that can actually teach too.
Nice. So, I'm sorry, when you said like you have no incentive to say it, I just imagine like some guy in a suit like you with like $100 and going, "Here you go, sir." No, I'm just kidding.
Just put that in my pocket. Oh, hey.
It's just great. Like there's no. Anyhow, sorry.
5 years free schoolism. What is that? Keep that safe.
But no, I've heard good things about schoolism from quite a few people. So
yeah, it's awesome. And I think it's geared a lot more towards illustration and animation and fine art, that kind of thing. But that's what I like. Like, I like comics. I love the medium. There's a lot of comic artists that I love, but kind of going on the identity theme here, there's something that I've been learning recently, that my inspiration, the kind of art that I want to make, is a lot more rooted in, I guess, sort of fine art sort of roots. It doesn't necessarily have to be all highfalutin, in a museum, that kind of thing. But, that sort of pursuit of, like, I care about things like light, shadow, and gesture, and all these things that don't necessarily, they're not requirements for comics. They're a tool that you could use, but they're more requirements for, like, fine art, painting, illustration, that kind of thing, but that's the kind of stuff that I really like. And it doesn't mean that I need to use all of that for comics, but it means that's the stuff that gets me fired up. And so I wanted to take a schoolism course. The way that it worked out is the course that I wanted to take, I didn't like so much that I switched to this other one, which ended up being kind of a happy accident, because the first assignment was to make to do a mind map, which I've never done before. Maybe I did in, like, grade school or something, but it's where you draw, like, your main idea in a circle in the middle, and then you start to branch off and connect different thoughts and whatnot. And the whole point of it was to think about what inspires you to make your art. Like, what's the kind of stuff that when you see it or when you experience it or whatever, it makes you feel like, oh, I got to write that down, or, oh, I'd like to draw that, or, oh, that gives me an idea. Or you look at someone's work and you go, oh, I wish I could make work like that, or it makes you want to do stuff. And it was supposed to be a short little thing. It ended up taking me like a whole day, and I've got 7 pages of this ridiculous mind map. And that's when it dawned on me, which is kind of what I was presenting to you, Scott, for the topic, was like, I got way too many influences. Like this, this is like almost like a therapy session. Holy crap, this is my problem. I'm inspired by too many things. I need to narrow it down.
That's interesting, because I always advocate for the more influences, kind of the better, because that's going to, because if, especially, well, maybe not, I guess there could be too much, like you're saying, but I think that what you don't want to do is just follow one artist and idolize that artist. No. You saw that a lot.
No.
And this may just be a house style thing, kind of, but you saw this a lot with Image, when Image first came out, and there'd be like a Rob Liefeld studio. All his artists were trying to emulate Rob Liefeld, and then that kind of thing.
J. Scott Campbell. How many people do you see drawing J. Scott Campbell girls?
Exactly.
Look exactly like his.
But if you take, and if those,
sorry.
But if you take, and especially if your influences are diverse, and I could, when I list my influences, I mean, it's everything from like an H.R. Giger to a Bill Watterson, to like a early Michael Golden or something like that. So I mean, but if you have all those different influences, then they kind of become, at least they sort of seep into your style or the way that you draw and everything. And it hopefully becomes different, different enough. So it's interesting that you kind of came to the conclusion that you had too many.
No, I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. But I think Teresa explained this to me, because I actually reached out to her for help with this homework, because she had already done that course before. And what she kind of came to the same conclusion. And what she ended up doing is she really critically looked at this, pile of influences and started looking at, well, what do I like about this person? What is it that I really like about their work? And she started noticing that, okay, well, I could take this one out because I like the same thing about them that I like about this person, but this person does it better. So if it's an influence that I'm using to get better, this is the one I should follow. This one's gone, that kind of thing. And that's ultimately what I found. And I also discovered I like a lot of artists. That doesn't necessarily mean I want to learn anything from it. Maybe their style's awesome and it's impressionable and it's cool, but that's a tangent I, maybe can avoid going down, or that's more of like I got some time to kill and I'm done with my work for the day. Let me screw around for a little bit, but not necessarily like I'm going to sit down and study and get better, that kind of thing. Because it's been nuts. I have gigs of folders of artists and stuff, because I'm like a sponge. I just absorb and I'm studying all this stuff all the time, because I love art, and I think that's actually kind of the bigger point that I kind of came to when I was doing this, was just how social media has sort of affected that. I know you guys can relate to this. There was a point where I'm younger, but I was on the cusp of like when the internet just dominated the world. And so there was a time where, okay, I want some inspiration. What am I going to do? Go outside? Maybe I like art. Maybe I'll go to the library and see what books they have on art. And like, you have like a row to choose from, and that's it. That's all and picking through all of that, you find maybe 4 or 5 books, maybe, in the time that you visit the library that really resonate. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, these are the 4 or 5 books that I'm going to draw from or look at or read and that inspire me. You got a couple movies, maybe because your dad brought them home or because that's what was at the video store. But now I could sit on Instagram while I'm trying to go to sleep, number one.
Yeah.
And I could see hundreds of different artists and hundreds of different pictures that are just like, boom, 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 boom. And I've been feeling like I'm adopting this sort of like cannibalistic sort of tendency to just screenshot. That's cool. But it's like, am I learning anything? Am I making any plan to use it? This is just haphazard liking. And
it's interesting. Did you ever keep a morgue, like a physical morgue?
Explain to me what a morgue is. I've heard the term before.
So it's basically just it could be anything, a box, or it could be I had a file cabinet where I would just find, things, pictures from magazines, like, that's something I might need to draw, like an X-ray or just add, or different cars or whatever, and I have all that, in there, and and eventually I think I might still have a few things that I might find difficult to find online, but it's so easy just to type that in, because I had a morgue and it was separated between like, this is like illustration styles or whatever, or vehicles, like I said, or poses or whatever. But still, it's not. It's so easy now to just search either on Pinterest or whatever the case. But but I do have. I was kind of doing like what you're saying, digitally too. I've got somewhere on my computer. I got a file with all that stuff, and it's organized in digital folders, but. Hardly even refer to it anymore, just because, and it's got a lot of cool stuff in it, but a lot of that stuff are just like, it's so easy to just type it in and have it pop up.
Yeah. That's my problem too. I learned that I add to this thing, but I never go back to it. I'm just like some data mining crazy man. Like I'm just storing. This is for the archives after the fall of the world.
Yeah. I think you've touched on a couple really important things. Like one is like where you're talking about the formalism. And kind of being drawn to kind of like art that's outside of comics and stuff like that. And like one of the things I really appreciate about like Cal State Long Beach, where I went to school, is like they had this like hardcore foundation program. So it's like I had to do like all the traditional stuff before we even were allowed to get into illustration.
Same.
And I hated it at the time. Up until like the point where we got into the illustration program. And then it was like, like all of those backlogs of like form and rendering and like composition and like even working with abstraction. So you're looking at like Kandinsky's and like weird stuff. And you're, even doing like assemblage and like like stuff that's outside of the box. It's just about formal arrangement and like 2D layout and stuff like that. Yep. And the funny thing is, the whole time I was doing it, I was like, I just want to do comics, man.
Yeah.
By the time I was done with it, I was like, oh, this helps me do comics because I have this whole backlog. But I think what helps in scenarios like that, like with a class setting or like it's a curated experience. You have a curriculum and you have an objective. So it's like if you're looking at like if you're taking a 2D design class, right? And you start looking at playing cards, then maybe look at specific playing card designers and artists just to learn like how to do like different compositional like juxtapositions, right? Like or if you're doing figure foreground flip, then when you're looking at MC Escher, like suddenly it makes a little more sense, some of the stuff he's doing and creating some of the illusions. But it's not like you're just looking at Escher and going like, that's cool. It's like you're looking at it and going, what are they doing that's fitting this formal thing that's like one of the structures of art.
That's a good point. Like isolate your influences, really look at what it is that you're trying to learn from them. And then suddenly you could just go, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah.
Nope, yep, nope, nope.
It's like I have different influences for different art and different objectives. When I paint, like my favorite painter in the world, like when I paint with like opaque paint, which I barely do anymore, but like I was even telling my wife, like when I finish this second book, I'm probably going to take like maybe a year and just paint.
That's awesome.
Or something, because I really do miss painting on like board.
Yeah.
But it's like Lucian Freud is my favorite painter, and nobody would guess that from my work. Like it doesn't, like my drawing style, you know, the form of it can be there, but it's like the whole Lucian Freud look is reliant on paint. It's like you can't do that.
Right.
I guess you could like mock it up on a like digitally, but half the fun of Lucian Freud is like looking at his paintings in person, and they're like just you know, paint like a mile off the canvas. And it varies depending on the medium, and it varies depending on the objective.
Totally. Yeah. That's a fantastic point, actually. That not to cut you off, but that's like a major point of kind of what I was doing critically looking at these people is like, okay, this is a fantastic painter. What do I like about him? His painting. You know, can I get that same effect with ink? No. All right. Yeah. Well, I love his work, but he's off the list for this at least, you know?
Yeah. And then when you go to painting, like that's the beauty of this whole experience and discovery of art is like when you go to painting, then you can revisit it. But I think keeping that objective is really important, you know? Yeah. Because like even like looking at cartoonists alone, like before we had this discussion, I just picked like I narrowed it down to 7 books.
Whoa.
7 books by 7 different cartoonists, right?
Nice.
And that's just from my graphic novel section. I didn't pull out my long box. I didn't get into stuff that influenced me early on.
Right.
It took a while. Like it took me like 20 minutes to just pick through. It's part of why I was like, oh, I'll be on in 3 minutes, you know? But so that process, like if you have to do that, like, and there's an endless limit of what you're looking at. Cause like most of the stuff I picked out is like specific. Like I can I specifically know what I pull from these artists. There's a million other artists. And then the funny thing is your formal experience, the beauty of that is like it when you're formally discovering, like you carry that with you anyway. So it's like whatever you learn formally is always going to affect your work, like regardless of what style you do.
It's true. That's
and that
very
was
true.
When, like in teaching college too, where it's like you get these kids who like think they're doing anime, and they think you hate anime because you're trying to get them to break this like crappy template that they draw, like because they're stuck in a habit. And you know, and you can show them like really solidly done anime, and they just can't see the difference between like this kind of weird like generic template thing they have, and then like legitimate like anime artists and manga artists who are like have a voice and have a style.
They do all the hard stuff. They're doing life drawings. They're doing, you know, everything to get their fundamentals down. Yeah.
And they're like
probably studying old masters too, and you know, copping some stuff off of them.
Right? So yeah, like that's I think that's a cool it's a good topic, and it's like it's a cool thing to think about, because I think you're right. Like you can get lost. I think Scott and you are right. Like, so I'm going to do that weird thing where it's competing, but it's like, I think both are true. Like you should pull as much influence as you can.
Totally. No, I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
You know, one of my favorite things in influences is like Japanese matchbooks, right? Like, I mean, you wouldn't think that, but like there's this from the 1700s to like the early 1900s, where Japan did these like weird 2-color designs, and tons of graphic designers I admire riff on these things, right? And I use those for like different typographic things and stuff. But it's like where the Rolling Stones got that tongue from and stuff. Like it's actually a Japanese matchbook.
That's awesome.
It's like, and how I found that out was looking at different artists in rock and roll and gig posters and was like, I love this. What are they looking at? And they were all looking at the same group of like, these weird matchbooks that were so. But you can end up in this like eternal loop where you're looking at everything cool and just kind of it kind of crosses that line of like consumption as opposed to and
exactly. Well, and I would go one step further and say that, you know, it's cool to idolize artists and stuff. That's totally fine. Like you got your favorites, maybe they just do it for you. They just get it right. But if you're an artist yourself, I think it's also healthy and kind of critical to really think about what it is that you like about them that you're trying to get into your work, and then leave it open to where someone else could replace them, you know, because like if you're really trying to learn how to color like them, well, look at other colorists. There's got to be someone else out there that does the same thing or similar or whatever. So, you know, you're not getting stuck in that, oh, I draw the J. Scott Campbell girl face type of situation where it's obvious and you just taken that. But that's okay too, because you can mix and match and do different things. Maybe you do the J. Scott Campbell face, but you paint like Rembrandt or something, and that looks different. Like you do that too. But I don't know where I'm at, and kind of my mode of thinking right now is killing my darlings. I guess it's a similar thing like that, but killing my favorites in it, and really looking at who else is out there that's doing things that I like that they do, and pulling that in and going, oh, I like that, you know. Or, oh, that guy does it a little better. And, you know, maybe I don't like this guy's art so much. I just like his design, and his design is cool. And that's kind of like Mobius or this or that. So, all right, you know, I guess Mobius is the guy for design in my little box that I've got here. You know, it's been interesting. And it's not to discredit any of them. They're all fantastic, but it's about that study. It's about honing in on who am I going to learn from ultimately, and who am I going to consume? You know, I could still sit down at night and read a graphic novel or a comic or whatever from all of those guys. But, you know, when I'm sitting down to learn something, whose work do I want to look at? You know?
Yeah. And man, that's so essential too, because a lot of, and Scott probably would agree with this, but I think a lot of how this can kind of mesh is like, let's say you narrow it down to 5. You look at who they were looking at.
Yes. Yeah. And now it becomes 12.
Just to have an idea of what it is that they borrowed for their work that you like. Like, you know, so like for me, like I love Chris Ware. My style's nothing like Chris Ware, but my approach to paneling is very influenced by Chris Ware, because I think he's one of the best at like pacing in comics. But Chris Ware led me to Frank King, which led and Crazy Cat and some other great just like classic cartoonists that he's looking at, and it's like, oh, okay, you know, Crazy Cat was like a mix between where later on reminded me of it, and then of course Calvin Hobbes, like that's usually going to lead most people to. But anyhow, the point being, like, that's a good way to kind of isolate it, where it's like, okay, these are kind of the way I want it to look. And then the other thing is, like you touched on, and then I want to stop hogging the time and stuff, but it's like the other thing you touched on that was so key is like, when you're kind of like, just because you like an artist or really dig their work, like that may not be your voice.
Right.
So, like if you pursue, like for me, if I pursued where like really just linear, shape-based, like very infographic almost, but like way better than most infographics, but still very like, he does it for a reason. Like he wants it to be symbolic, because you know, comics are just symbols, and so it's like the easier the symbol is to read, like the more a comic flows, the less like you have to work to read it. It's just kind of like an innate language. Yeah. And I, you know, that's great, but I also love R. Crumb, and I love like these guys who over render, and so it's like you can't let, just because you like something, or like one of my favorite cartoons is Graham Annabelle, and I don't draw any influence in my life from him. But dude can draw.
You like his stuff. Yeah.
So it's like
Wrightson. I love Wrightson stuff. I have no desire to make anything like that, but I appreciate the hell out of it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I think you really hit the nail on the head about your voice, your unique voice. And actually, Holly just said something in the chat
I'll
that
pull
just
it up.
exploded in my brain. Yeah, that it's not just the style, but it's the actual content. And that is so true, because if you get so focused on an artist or a style, then that's all you're focused on. You're focused on making work that looks cool. Essentially, if you really boil it down, you're just focused on, well, what would look cool, what would look like that. You're not thinking about expressing anything anymore. Like the whole point of this whole thing, at least from my perspective and what I'm doing, is building up a tool set. I don't want to be thinking about whether it looks like this person or that person, or whether it's cool or not. It's, what am I trying to say, and can I express it? You know, and so studying these different people, especially people that you admire, and figuring out what it is you admire about them, you can hone in on that tool and add it to your belt. And now you don't have to think about color theory the next time you make your piece. You can just think about that emotion, and you have that experience with color theory to use it to express that emotion, or line weight, or light and shadow, or volume, whatever it is that you're trying to learn. But that's the key, you know, take your idols and distill them down into their essence, and suck the essence, the soul, eat their souls, is what we're trying to say.
Well,
All right, I lost it there.
I think,
but essentially, right? That's what we're doing.
It just reminds me of Dark Crystal, the essence.
Distill their essence.
that is one of the main things that often misused quote, like, feel like an artist is meant to say. Like, you know, a lot of people will like misinterpret that and do like what, you know, secret companies in China have done to me, and like, you know, just take my shirt designs and reprint them and sell them in a retail store. Like, no, that's not stealing like an artist. That's just stealing. But
it's a touchy phrase. I completely get what it means, but I think some people don't get what it means. It's like that Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride. I do not think that means what you think it means.
But yeah, it's like, you know, but like looking at Cezanne or something and going like, holy crap, the way that guy does color and doesn't just like mud all the shadow. Like, and you can translate like a Cezanne, which is not like most, actually more cartoonists should look at Cezanne when they're doing color. Because if you're doing that, then when you're mixing your CMYK values, you're not going to have black in most of your color in your shadows. You're going to experiment with like complementary shadows. And like, that's something that like Cezanne you could pull from and be like, I've got that. Goodbye, oil paint. But I do understand that thing about color from this dude, you know, like, so I totally, I love that. And the great thing about it is, by kind of what you're talking about too, it's like, it's also a matter of being less precious about it, right? Because like we're all kind of, especially in comics, like we're all a little bit hoardy. You know, where it's like,
territory.
And so it doesn't hurt to occasionally like just be less precious and be like, okay, I can like that artist, but I don't have to be that artist. Like, and a replica of that artist would really be pretty boring. you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of depends what you're doing. Like if you're looking to work at a specific studio that has like a house style or something, sure. But I mean, if we're talking about identity and stuff, I assume the topic is kind of more for people who aren't trying to do that. Because if you're even thinking about identity, you shouldn't be looking to, you know, join the machine anyways, because you're not going to get to express yourself. But yeah, I think that's important. And I don't know, art's always been a super personal thing to me. You know, it's like it's integrated into my being. Like even from like a little child, like it was always a way to express it, and never crossed my mind to do anything with it professionally until way later, when I realized I'm not even that great at anything else. I should probably find a way to make this thing that I do compulsively work. But you know, when you think about that, and I know almost everybody can relate to that. It's like you have to find a way to express yourself, your own voice. What does that look like? What do you bring to the table with that? And it's not always about just the story, but how you convey it. Like one thing that I pulled from this class, which I don't want to take any credit for this because I thought it was kind of profound. The class itself is called, I think, Storytelling and Illustration. It's Jamela, I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Knopf, Knoff, MPF. She's German. Anyways, just so you know where this is coming from. This is my own words. But she was giving the example of a coffee table, somebody drinking coffee, and like 15 different artists could interpret that in a completely different way. And the only way they're going to do that is based on their own personal experience. Maybe one chooses to focus on the lighting and the time of day. Maybe it's early morning. There's a little cat at her feet and she's got a warm cup of coffee and she's getting ready to face the day. Maybe it's another one that the way that they controlled the lighting is it's late in the evening. What is this person doing up late drinking coffee? That's a completely different context, but it's the same exact thing. It's someone drinking coffee. You're drawing the same thing. You're painting the same thing, but you give it to different people that have a different voice and it says something completely different. And so it's kind of the same with all these different tools that you could pick up from learning. You learn these little things, you use them in your own way to say what you have to say. It's not just about making a cool thing. Anybody can draw a character in a cool pose. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't mean anything. But the right pose with the right context can mean everything. That same character that's supposed to be a tough guy, but you drew him in a slightly dejective kind of way. Whoa, that says something. And suddenly people are stopping on that one while they're scrolling through Instagram going, instead of going like they did with all the rest of them that were a tough guy in a pose. I don't know. Maybe this is a little too highfalutin woo-woo kind of stuff, but
no, I think it's important because I used to tell my classes that too, where like, I was like, I'm not going to teach like a boring rendering class where you take like a picture of a duck and you learn how to like do a marker comp on like toned paper, and then you slowly build up your pastels. And then, wow, look, it looks like a photograph. It's a perfectly rendered duck, because that's a trick. And it's a trick and it's a skill and it's a craft, and it's good to know how to do that. Like, and pretty much I don't know if three of us would have any trouble doing that. I don't mean it in a negative way. I just think like if all three of us like made that a project, a couple,
sure.
10 hours or so of rendering, and there you go. Like you got a beautiful duck. But the point is, if we all did that assignment based on like one photograph and we hung it in a gallery, like nobody's going to give a crap about who the artist was who did it, because we'd have the same exact result.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in like factory art, like in that sense. Like, and I don't blame people who take gigs doing factory art, because that's a day job. And you know what? Like, hey, it's more fun to draw than like pump gas or like, or do manual labor or something. But it's like when it comes to art as expression of yourself, like I think it's really important to be saying something. And I think you can say something with composition. And I think especially if you visually communicate, like if you have a story that you're not visually communicating, even if that's a compositional story, like that's like muting yourself, So I think that's another really good point, because it's like that's what creates that great variety, where it's like, if you look at one of the iconic like artists, I'm not even gonna name one, but it's like there's too many. But the point is, look at like a really iconic artist, generally you're gonna know who did it very quickly when you look at it. And part of how you're gonna know is because they have a visual voice, and some of that is a visual voice that's like a blender mix of like 5 different artists that like I don't like, people used to clown on Adrian Tomine for his work looking a lot like Klaus, partially because he mentored under Klaus, right? But it's like, if you look at a Daniel Klaus thing and you put it next, like Tomine, you can recognize from like a mile away. It's like when you see like a New Yorker cover that's Tomine, it's not like you go, oh, there's a Daniel Klaus cover. It's Tomine. He has these soft muted colors, like really open lines. Whereas like, Klaus has this crazy, like when he draws characters, like it's great. They cast Steve Buscemi in Ghost World, because his characters kind of have like a Steve Buscemi vibe, where it's like they're always like a little over rendered on the eyes and like kind of creepy about the way, and it's like, that's great. Like, that's great. And I would hate if they both drew the same way, because like a Tomine drawing a woman is different than a Klaus drawing of a woman, and like they're not like the cookie cutter thing. I think that's what's boring about a lot of comics, like honestly, like superhero comics. Like that's one of the reasons I really like indies, is just the vast variety of stuff.
A lot more variety. There's some variety in technique in the superhero genre. That's something that I've actually come to appreciate actually later. I never really noticed when I was a kid. I saw like there was everybody else, and then there was the Image guys and Dark Horse, and I mean there were some that were different, but for the most part I wasn't paying attention about all the differences. But it's a lot of the differences are like technique based. It's how they might render, or maybe it's the specific school of thought that they went through in terms of construction. Most use Loomis, but the one guy that does the Riley thing, well, he stands out because that's just different, But yeah, I totally agree. When you go the indie route, you see a lot more variety and very obvious variety, not the kind of variety you got to really sit there and dissect to see, which is cool. I mean, it's a medium. That's something that, just a little tangent, that's something that frustrates me about being a comic artist, just being an artist in general, interested in comics at all. When you talk to the general public and you say that that's what you do, immediately they think superheroes every time. And I even as a kid, I never wrote any superhero stories. That wasn't my thing. I was into them, but it wasn't like my main thing. I was reading like Milk and Cheese, the Max, the Mask, the Predator comics, like all kinds of different stuff. Not superheroes, but that's what people think of when you say comics. Oh, you make comics? Oh, like Spider-Man? No, there's all this. It's an art form, There's like, you could paint a comic. Flaherty did. He acrylic paint. It's amazing.
I've been asked in a couple interviews, like for people who write about comics, like they've written about comics before, and they've been like, how many memoirs are there in comics? And I was like, really?
A lot.
Writer, like how many memoirs are in books? I mean, there should be more, I think, but it's like, it's just fascinating that like to outside of our bubble, like in our bubble, most of us know there's tons of memoir and graphic novel, like there's a whole field of like amazing comics, and that's just like if you're looking at like US comics, and if you get outside the US, it's just like overwhelming.
Oh yeah. Oh, especially like Europe. Oh, it's like they treat comics in a completely different way. Completely different. I mean, even size wise, there's no real standard. You can get comics in all kinds of different crazy formats and stuff over there, which is cool. I like that. They approach it more like a fine art in that sense,
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I tried to, when I was doing my my comic book digital products, and I set up the the American and the manga side.
Yeah.
So when I wanted to do European, it's like I don't know if there's a standard European, but
yeah.
magazine format.
There's a lot of magazine size, but yeah. I've even bought like different volumes of the same comic from a European comic, and they're different formats. I don't know how that even makes sense.
It's like, I guess it's like, prose here or anywhere. I mean, there's really no standard for, prose book sizes or anything. So, well, Holly had a couple comments regarding layout, which, I agree with that. I love
for comics. Totally. That's why it takes me so freaking long to do anything with comics. I like my thumbnail stage lasts forever because and those are people that I look up to. Is like Howard Chaykin, for example, is talk about layout. His are insane. I don't know if you could say if it's like, great or weird or what. It's like everywhere in between, because the guy was just constantly experimenting with that whole concept of layout and what a comic can be, and timing and like weaving different story together in the panel. So you got this thing happening and this little like 1-inch bar across here, and you got a separate story going. Like what there's so much you could do with the comics medium that you can't do with anything else. That's kind of the coolest thing about it, which is a whole other area in itself to learn. Apart from the art side of things, just studying comic artists and their panel layouts. Francis Manipool is another one. I don't read The Flash, but I came across him because of a friend of mine, Ralph, who's super into the Flash. Francis Manipool, holy crap, for what he did with The Flash and these panel layouts that he came up with. They're like shattered glass or like a clock face and just like a million tiny little panels around like a silhouette image of just to convey that idea of how the Flash experiences time. And again, I'm not a big superhero guy, but that idea resonates. I get that. I get the concept. And what a brilliant way to do that. I'd never appreciated the character more until this guy comes around and does this thing in comics form with the layout. It was literally the layout that made me appreciate the character more. Because here he is, he's just standing in an intersection, and there's 100 different panels of like somebody walking across the street, somebody bouncing a ball, someone checking the time, this person looking at their phone, da 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 da. And that's his little like ADD brain just like observing everything around him. That's incredible. It made me want to read The Flash, but I'm not going to, but it made me want to.
I like that's being brought up because like one of the things I wish, like I see a lot of cartoonists exploring, but I wish more would explore is the idea of making comics that are comics, and that's the end.
Yeah, and not like storyboards. There's so many that are just story. Well, maybe not so much anymore, but early 2000s was like the storyboard era.
When I checked out, so like when I talk about mainstream comics too, it's like I haven't really paid attention to mainstream comics, and when I have, like Corey keeps trying to get me into the, like he showed me the work of that guy who does like punk rock Jesus.
Oh yeah,
like
John Gordon Murphy.
Yeah, and it's like his ink is just like,
it's cool.
It's not,
talk about different too. It's unique.
Movement, and like it's definitely recognizable, and it's not like there's no one who's drawing that way and inking that way, and it's and mainly ink just and movement of characters, and it's like so yeah, when I and even in classic comics, it's like you don't mistake Ditko for
yeah. There's a difference.
I think I think it also can be dangerous too, in the sense of like and I think this is the fun of comics, and why I think people need to spend equal time making from just researching, because when you're making it, you're gonna come up with explorations that are also just totally inspired by the process of making. And so it's like, if you make a story, the story that you made, when you start putting it to the page, it just that weird process where you're taking your own type or your own idea and then you're transferring it to the page will, like, sometimes out of necessity just force you into like doing a weird thing, like a weird exploration with panels and stuff. And then also when you're doing it, you can catch yourself getting in a rut with the panels, and then you have to break. And so it's like, it's a good way, even that process, like, let's say you're on a page, you're roughing out pages like I'm doing now, and you're like, man, I've been doing grids for like 20 pages or something. It's like, that in itself can launch an exploration where you have to pull out those books of stuff you love, and you go like, I don't know. And then you'll see some weird thing and be like, whoa, I got to try that,
I try to give myself rules to follow, and sometimes that helps me, but it hasn't helped me make something that I feel confident or proud of or particularly excited about. Like, I feel like exploring, especially when it comes to layouts, is sort of a necessity. And I have all my stuff packed up now, so I can't share this, but maybe the next time, if I come on again after we've already moved, I'll show you. I have this little, I make these kind of homemade sketchbooks. This one's bigger than normal, but I just take regular copy paper and I staple it together. I have a bunch of these that are literally just copying layouts that I like. Like I'll flip open a graphic novel, or I'll see something online or whatever, and I just try to just see through the art and break down just what have they done here with the layout, because it's so interesting to me. And when I get stuck or when I'm trying to do my own, I'll flip through it for ideas, not necessarily to copy the layout verbatim, but what were they trying to do? What was going on there design wise, just with these shapes, And it's fascinating what people come up with. And sometimes you kind of have to include the art too. So I have another, I guess I would call it a morgue file, because it's kind of like what you were talking about, Scott, where I take either screenshots, or if it's like a web comic, I'll take I'll take a photo, or a screenshot, and then I'll overlay the page, but with like the panel borders kind of highlighted, so that I could see that like separate from the art, because sometimes it's the art that's actually leading the eye through the page and stuff. There's so much to learn there, and it's not even a precise thing. There's no rule book out there that says this is exactly the way it's got to be. Even some of those rules about the way your eye is supposed to follow, I've seen broken time and time again, and I get it. I know what they want me to read and what the next panel is without a problem. So man, it is the craziest art form. Comics is insane,
dude. And here's the thing: is like there's people who've dedicated lifetimes to just studying book grids, and this is text book grid, not even including images. Just like what's the most effective layout, what's the most effective grid, and like graphic designers have spent years just creating these crazy grids, usually all kind of originating from. It's weird because we all know like it has to do with like the spiral or whatever the grid.
Yeah.
But it's like and a lot of the perfect grids like kind of correspond with the golden mean, but none of us are really thinking about the golden mean. We're just looking like, oh, this grid with this spiral kind of works.
Yeah.
Even isolated to that, and you're like, I'm going to do a book where like every grid's based on the golden mean. There's like 5 billion variations that you could spend a lifetime on. It's
one of those things you could almost apply to anything too, depending on which way you turn it and twist it or flip it. It can work.
So yeah, but I do think these are things that are important to think about because they'll be in the back of your head, and often they help when you hit a rut. Like the point, like if I'm like 5 panels in, I'm like, why isn't this flowing? Mm-hmm. It's like I need to rely on a whole bunch of things like, why does it seem like time changed? Okay, I need to remember basic story structure stuff of the line of action and not be Scott Snyder. Sorry for people who like Scott Snyder, but he's terrible with that. The line of action gets crossed all the time, and so that's why the time flow, whether you like him or not, in his films is like almost indecipherable.
Huh. I have to pay attention to that next time.
Yeah,
I think I get what you're saying, but now I'm going to pay extra attention.
Yeah, but like, so if I'm doing like a conversation sequence and I cross the line and I didn't mean to, which there's a way to efficiently do it, but it's like then I can be like, oh, that's the awkward thing. Or if the flow's not working out, then you can like think about that Z grid, or like even text placement, where it's like you know, a lot of people early on in comics like try to get crazy with their grids, and that might actually be a mistake. Like it might be better to just do a 4-4 grid and like have it legible and something somebody can read, as opposed to, because a lot of early comics, like sometimes you'll read like, and they're not kind of keeping a left to right thing, but they're also not giving you any indicators. Like Chris Ware's a master at this, where it's like you'll you know, like as a lot of his book covers, like this, the hard covers, you can fold the soft cover to like this giant poster, and you could start at any spot in the poster and have this like coherent wordless comic that where you're just turning the page upside down and like flipping it around. And
that's awesome. I've thought about stuff like that, but I haven't actually seen anything done like that. That would be really cool. Actually, I think, no, take that back. So, okay, I kind of lied a little bit about not reading superhero books. There is one that really got me, and that was the Court of Owls Batman thing. For whatever reason, my in-laws for years were getting me Batman books every Christmas. That was just like, okay, we're getting to know Mike. He makes comics. We'll get him comics. And so that's how I got introduced to the Batman Court of Owls. Well, they have a section in that book where Batman's all drugged up, like he gets kidnapped and thrown in this maze. And what Capullo decided to do for this sequence, it's like 6 pages where every time you turn the page, you have to turn the book. And so you start, you know, in your normal format, and then you turn the page, and now suddenly it's vertical, and you have to read it that way. And then you turn the next page, and now it's this way, and you have to read it that way. And the whole thing is so disorienting. And I was like, this is cool. Like I'm participating now in how disoriented and just out of sorts Batman is feeling right now. This is really awesome. I've never experienced anything like that in a comic before. That was really cool. I was kind of sad to see that end, as I haven't read any Batman since then, and I was starting to get used to it. I was enjoying that.
So this was like one of my introductions to Chris Ware. This is the back
Whoa.
unfolded of his Jimmy Corrigan, the Smartest Kid on Earth hardcover, which if you get the hardcover because
wow, that is
too late. I bought the soft cover. Now I'm regretting it.
So what's crazy is, you go through it and it's like, there's no like up or down, and like you can start pretty much like there's pretty obvious starting points. But it's like if you start anywhere, it's going to lead you through, and there's all these little indicators where it'll tell like this entire narrative. It's insane what this guy does. And you can turn it all over the place, and it makes coherent, perfect sense. It's insane. And wordless, like most of it. And it's like that kind of exploration with like the minimal amount of line and stuff, where he can tell like a totally emotional story. And I've seen him do that with books where he's got a book that's 50 books or 10 books, and you read them in any order and it works. But it's not like when he does it. It's weird. It's just the things you can do with comics are endless. And like the cool thing is, and this ties into something you and I chat about, because you were talking about like trying to figure out like which styles. And I was telling you, like, there's also the option of not picking a style or isolating to a couple styles.
Yeah.
One thing that bugs the hell out of me in comics is people like restricting themselves to one style who have it's almost like a fighter in an MMA fight choosing to just be boxing, but they know
just keep hitting him with that right jab.
And it's like if you're in MMA and you can use Taekwondo, why would you always choose to box? Like it just doesn't make sense. Like in this fight of making stories, like we should be using every little trick in the book that we want.
Totally. No, that's a valid point, actually, and I don't think I would do it as extreme as you had, where you have two distinct styles.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I think in just my storytelling in general, and specifically for Sisyphean Complex, there's two very different tones kind of going on in the book.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be able to help kind of flip-flopping a little bit with the style, because there's a lot of humor and then there's a lot of very serious tone going on, and I could easily see it already in my sketchbooks and my concept work that I'm doing for the book, that there's certain scenes that take on a kind of realism to them, and then there's other scenes that almost get like the figures are broken and crazy, almost like a Looney Tunes sort of situation happening. And so that already is like two very different styles, but they're kind of still grounded in some of the same stuff. So the same coloring style, the same inking style, all of that's still the same, but it's like the underneath, it's the mechanics, I guess you would say, or the pencils, to put it, No,
and I think that would be just as valid, where it's like, I mean, Sam Keith did that a lot, and I think so good was like it would go from these fully rendered, like kind of tight pages, nothing tight with his work. It's all like very gestural, but there's a tighter Sam Keith look, like tight rendered, and then there's like a loose, crazy. And the thing I loved about it too is even in his character designs, like he would shift from, a character like the Max that's still kind of based on a human, like janitor, but it's like, with like a big tooth mask
situation.
but then you have stuff like the exploding fairies or like the Izzes, where it's like these little characters that are like almost like these weird chibi characters living in the world, and render them in a similar style. So like the style shifted, but it worked, and it kind of made a very like I think Sam Keith's a good example of that too, where it's like, man, you see that, like, because I got turned on to him with Wolverine, right? Because I was
nice, like, his Wolverine is cool looking.
I
like the style of it.
Yeah, if he was off the book for like a month, I wouldn't even be interested in buying the book, because it's just those covers that he put out. You'd just be like, holy crap, like, who is this? Like, so cool, and his feet are so big. So but yeah, like I do think we should explore more and use more, like, don't be afraid to like go outside of like this, like, the restrictions are there, like creating limits is good, for the creative process, right? Because if you don't have a box, you're actually going to have trouble thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah.
You have to almost like, it's like you have to build your own coffin in a weird way.
Yeah. You got to lay down your own rules, because I mean, if you're anything like me, you get lost on tangents. And so if you start going too far on a tangent, sometimes it helps if things stop working to know where you started and start to kind of go back there. Kind of like what you were saying, where when you're like stuck, sometimes you just need to pick something to constrain, give yourself some kind of constraint. So sometimes that's like, all right, I'm going to make a composition with the golden spiral, or I'm going to make a painting trying to use only blue or 2 colors or whatever. But sometimes those constraints really help to then ground you and help to, get you back on track when you're frustrated too.
Yeah. And I like limiting fonts is huge. Like where it's like, if you're going to use fonts or hand done lettering or whatever, it's like, you still don't want to have like 5 million typefaces.
Yeah.
Because
that's weird. That's kind of been a thing that's become, I think, more apparent with a lot of digital comics. Nothing against it. I think it's kind of like it's like the Wild West right now with digital comics, or at least it has been for a long time. But you see a lot of fonts, but again, that's because you have that pool of infinite fonts. You go to the website like font.com or whatever, and there you go. Just like Instagram, you're scrolling. I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. You forget what you even wanted the font for in the first place,
I love it. So CWC said the Max, you're talking my language tonight. I was at the Max head. I have a good friend now that I've known for almost 20 years, actually probably over 20 years now. And we met through the letters section.
No way. That's awesome.
We had a little pen pal thing. And so like, we were like, you like the Max? Like, and this was like pre-cartoon.
That's cool.
We're like these nerdy kids being like, she lived in San Francisco. So she turned me on to a bunch of like punk rock I'd never heard of. Anyhow, yeah. But so like the Max, I'm actually in a couple issues of the Max.
That's crazy. I've actually, I don't usually read the letters section, but that's one that I've read all of them just because I love the way that Sam Keith responds to everybody. Like he's kind of crotchety and grumpy about stuff, and almost like in character.
There's a demo for my old band when I was like a teenager. We had like a tape cassette, and you were allowed, if you were like in the Max thing, to like just stuff for him to put in like it was almost like a classified section. And I was like, order away for Kung Fu's demos. So like,
awesome.
if you have like the first printings,
I'm gonna have to dig through my issues. That's awesome.
search for nerdy.
Maybe I should have you sign it.
Section, John. I like the Max. I was like hard like on that to the point where I bought Friends of Max, like you know.
That's probably one of my most complete collections would be the Max. I think Spawn too, because Max, there wasn't like a ton. It really had like a short lifespan, but man, I didn't really understand it at the time. And then going back and rereading it, I realized why, because it's very open to interpretation in a lot of cases, which is kind of what's cool about it, actually.
Yeah, I love that. I think we would have got along back in the. I mean, we get along now, but I'm
still would have got along.
You're like the Max. That's
hell yeah.
Those were my jam too.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised there isn't a resurgence of the Max, or I don't know, maybe there is, and I'm just not aware of it. As far as has there been any like recent publications of bringing back that character in?
I think they tried at some point, but if I'm not mistaken, that whole thing fell through. I don't think it actually sustained. I think he had an idea to kind of keep it going, but then it petered out.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I remember this animated series.
Yeah, I want to say it was Image that wanted him to keep it going because he created this kind of superhero in a way, but it wasn't really meant to be that. It wasn't really meant to keep going. It was more of psychological exploration of trauma and things like that. Yeah,
for a superhero book, it doesn't really have a ton of superhero stuff.
No.
It does have cool things like sitting on a cliffside clipping toenails.
Yeah. Occasionally running from Iz's that are fighting a giant shark. Curled up in a box in an alley, questioning reality.
I need to reread those issues, man.
Yeah, I just did recently, actually. I went through a whole, going back to the identity thing earlier this year. I just pulled out one of my long boxes. It's the only one that I have left. I lost a couple during a few moves, sadly. I lost a lot of stuff, personal art and everything. But what I had left, luckily, was like the max. I got all my spawns. I got a bunch of elf quests and just kind of, random this and that stuff. And so I haven't opened that stuff in a long time. So I went through pretty much like from the start of the box to the end, and I reread all of my spawn, all of my max, all of my bone, and where I didn't have issues, I would either look them up online or I would try and buy the trades offline so that I could read those missing pieces that I didn't get a chance to. It was really cool. It really got me like just freaking so pumped to make comics again, and really invigorated that whole, like, why are you even doing it in the first place, and why are you following these people on Instagram? Sam Keith's right here, Todd's right here, you got your comics, man, go. It was cool. It's kind of a nice little reaffirming thing. Yeah.
So
what do you, oh, sorry, I was just like kind of curious, like, so do you feel like you've found your identity?
No, man, I'm on a journey, just like anybody. I think it constantly shifts and changes, And right now, especially with the move, I'm really looking forward to creating a new space for myself where it's not so. This is gonna sound weird, like I'm trying to get away from comics. I'm not, but I'm just trying to not be influenced by anything, be that art, animation, whatever. I've spent a lot of time consuming. I've spent a lot of time trying to find my place, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, like, I'm an artist. I've been doing this my whole life. I know what I'm doing. I need to just do it. And this new move is kind of like the perfect opportunity, especially since now we're coming in to the end of a crazy situation this year. This was absolutely nuts. I'm happy for that to be over. So it's a good time to get back on your feet, get back to doing stuff. But with the new place in this new space, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be a little bit more isolated because I'm in a basement. For one, I have a lot more control over what I do with that space, which is going to be amazing. So I can make messes again. This is going to be the first time in 10 years that I'm going to have a place where I can paint, I can sculpt, I can make things with wood. I love building things, and I can do all of that and not have to worry about anything because it's an unfinished basement, and I'm finishing it in a semi-finished art studio kind of way where, if I feel like going nuts and doing a Jackson Pollock one day, I can do that. I'm not hurting anything. We can put our flooring down and put walls up later if we ever want to sell it. So I'm looking forward to exploring that. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. And I'm on the cusp of getting started with my comic. I've got my scripts going. I got a lot of concept work going, and I'm ready to see what this thing looks like. And I kind of just want it to take whatever form it's going to take. And that's why right now it felt very important for me to sort of isolate those influences, really look at who inspires me legitimately. Like, what do I really want to learn from these influences, and take it in and then shut it all off. I'm not going to get rid of Instagram and Facebook and all that. I'm just going to take a break. I'm just going to stop consuming for a while and just create with what I've got instead of constantly taking it in, because this is going to take me a while. It's a long comic. I got quite a few issues to go. I mean, what sense does it make if I'm going down one path and then I'm flipping through Instagram one day and I go, oh, that's cool, let me incorporate that? I feel like I just want to do me, I just want to do me, whatever that is. I know I'm the sum of all the things that I've ingested anyways, but, I just want to see what that looks like without constantly being influenced, so we'll see. Yeah.
You'll have to do once you get your studio, you'll have to, I know you haven't done a video in a while, but you got to do a studio tour or something.
I've been thinking about that, man. And, the video thing, I was going to come back to videos earlier this year and I feel like I missed the perfect opportunity to. I was talking to my buddy Creed about this because, the world went to hell, politically, we got the pandemic, just all kinds of things were happening. And I don't know if everyone's probably forgot about this right now, but when I was first doing Space Cat, which didn't happen, it didn't pan out. But when I was doing those videos, I had this character that I played who was a part of the comic, and it was Future Mike, and he had like a trench coat and the goggles, and he had a mask on, which we're all wearing now. And the thing that he said, one of the last episodes that I did where I was doing all the special effects and stuff, he comes back from the future and he was yelling at present time me, and he was saying, you have to finish Space Cat. If you don't finish Space Cat, the whole world's going to fall apart. And so I was like, oh my God, he has to come back and say, see, I told you so. It's all your fault. You should
Oh, yeah, that was classic. Yeah, I remember that. That was great. That's what got me. Well, back then there weren't a whole lot of people doing like the 100 days making comics and everything.
It was very
but still, definitely your stuff rose to the top because it was great with all the special effects you're doing. Yeah,
it was fun.
I love it. I also love that because I hit a really weird point with my art where I was doing some things with my art that I realized I didn't want to do, and I was just doing them because that's what you do.
Yeah.
One of them in particular was like I wasn't using a lot of interior line, so I was working in a very I was kind of heading in more of a direction of easy to photocopy, which was the whole purpose, or not even photocopy, but it translates better on a stat cam, right? And I'm like, I realized I don't even like a lot of artists that heavily render. But I just realized, for myself, I have to do some hatching and stuff on this because it just needs it. For me on this, and it was just that part of the story, and that's the style I'm married to for now. And I think that to me is a really, at least for me, it was kind of profound to realize and then when here's the thing, this book's taken me years, right? The next one's probably going to take me a couple years minimum. Graphic novels take a long freaking time to make. And so while I'm debating styles, I can have nothing and still be debating styles, or I can marry a style for a little bit that I like, that feels like me, that feels right for the story. Because the story, I think, in comics, if you love comics, the story should be the reason, not you. Your ego shouldn't be a part of it. It should be your ego's told through that story. And whatever works for that story. If that story needs to be told with chibi characters in 3-panel grids, and that's how you want your book, and you need it to be 10 by 4, that book. Don't do a standard just to make some crappy corporate thing. You can get plenty of work doing that is full of other people's bad ideas, but when you're doing your own ideas, invest in that just and think of it as an act of love. It's one of the most foolish things I've ever heard about relationships, my own opinion, right, is the idea of there's only one person for you out there, and you find that person and they're the light, and it's everything's magical. It's not that, actually. It's you kind of choose it. You actually and most people who've been married for a while or whatever, or in a relationship for a while, they know that it's there's points where you actually pick I'm staying in this, and I'm in love with this person.
We're gonna make this work. This takes work.
Yeah. Love is work and action, and it doesn't always work out, and comics are like that. So if you love comics, you wouldn't do comics if you don't love comics, because it's
you'd just be a masochist. Well, maybe you're still a masochist. I don't know.
If you love something, that's what you got to commit to. So I would say that too. I think that's cool that you're going to proceed forward because you'll commit to a style, and it's gonna, whatever style you do page 1, you're bound to that style for a bit, and then it's just like a marriage at that point. You're married to that for a little bit, and then and then you're done. When you're done with your story, or it shifts in tone, and then the story allows for more exploration. I mean, Scott's got that going too, where it's Young and the Dead. The style that's done in is a little different than the posters he makes. It still looks like Scott.
Oh, totally.
But it's like, and Scott's stuck with that style for a while, like, but you grow to love it, and then also you end up with the thing
Yeah.
at the end,
I
So
always know Scott stuff when it comes up instantly, no matter what it is.
I feel the same
Awesome.
with yours, Mike. It's just like when you explore, and when you sent that new artwork, there's definitely some differences and some experimentation in some of the pieces that I hadn't seen, a little more painterly and some things, but I could still tell it was you. So
That's crazy to me. I don't get it, because I'm all over.
I don't either. Everyone. I mean, unless you're, there's some people that are chameleons and can, like, oh, I'm going to go after this style and just nail it. I mean, for me, it's just came over time, and I don't really recognize it as much as other people do. But people tell me, oh yeah, I can point your stuff out. So, and it's the same way. I think when you're so close to it, just what you do, you don't see it as much.
Yeah, definitely don't. And the other thing that's great about references and stuff like that, like this process you're going through, is when you're done with the book, or like when you're promoting it, it's like it also gives you points of reference to give other people, because like what I've found is I care less and less about like kind of my influences, not as like I care about them, like I love the art, but it's like when you get into these things, and you guys all know this, but it's like when you guys get in the thick of this, when you're in the thick of a script, like you don't have time to look at a bunch of crap. Like you're in the thick of making.
Yep.
And it's like, so then that's like part of why I've lost touch with a lot of current comics is I've been making, I just haven't, like the window I have that I'd be reading comics, I'm making them. Like I can't.
Yeah.
So the catch is, but once you're promoting, you have to give people frames of reference. Cause like one of the first things, like when you're building a pitch or like a proposal, is going to be like, or even writing back copy or like talking to press or anything like that, is going to be like, so who's your art like? And if you go like, well, it's my own thing, like that's not going to give the reader any indication of like people they know. That gives them a point of entry where they're like, oh, I might like this,
Yeah.
Right? Like we were just talking about Sam Keith. If somebody liked Sam Keith and read an article that's like, this guy's kind of like Sam Keith crossed with whatever, you might be like, oh, I like Sam Keith. Maybe I'll pick this up. So that's a good other reason too. The thing that sucks sometimes is you can kind of forget where certain things came from.
True. Yeah.
A lot.
Or, again, you could use that as like your base, your recipe to refer back to,
Yeah.
I did that with Sisyphine Complex. It was crazy, but I distilled it down into like, what are the influences going into this? Because I really had to think about it a lot, because it's crazy. It's a mixed genre type of situation. So it's not really easy to explain, but it's one of those things that I feel like it just has to exist. It just has to. I know by all accounts it shouldn't work, and maybe it won't work, and it's just going to be this beautiful mess that's just a fun experience that doesn't add up. But
that's great though. Like, and I think like for your writing style, where you have like, at least I get the sense that like there's this kind of almost like Python-esque humor kind of underlying things, but then there's very serious like nature to it too. And then the art is just so like explorative and cool and like just crisp. Like
nice. Yeah, that's a good description. I'll take it.
I feel like a story that's like that, where you're saying like maybe it'll be a beautiful mess. I actually think that would be awesome. I'd rather read a beautiful mess than like a cautious like like I'd rather have somebody go all in.
Yeah.
Than like read something that's half in. Like that's why even like and with your skills in writing and stuff, it's gonna be good. But the beauty of going all in is like like even Liefeld, like I've looked at Liefeld again recently and been like, I kind of like Liefeld now. Because
he's not a bad guy. I don't.
As an artist, I think before it was a meme, we used to all kind of clown on like the lacking feet and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's such a like common thing to do. It kind of made me relook at it And I've started realizing, like, dude, that guy for like a 20-year-old was like all in. He's just like, I am drawing this. I'm gonna make it really cool.
Yep.
I'm gonna like a mechanical arm to this character. I'm gonna draw on it.
Super into it.
It's kind of fun to look at. Like, you can tell he's having fun and he's going all in. So it's like, in a weird way, it's like, even if it ends up like Liefeld, like at that era, it's still
Honestly, I don't even care. Like I got to a point where because I have already written this script two different times front to back, because this is not a brand new idea for me. This is actually something that I came up with before Space Cat, but because of all the feedback that I was getting when I had first started the challenge, a lot of people had kind of talked me out of, even though I had experience with art, I didn't have like a ton of experience finishing comics. Like, I'd done cartoons, I'd done short little strips, this and that, little side projects. But as far as completing finished comics, I didn't have a lot under my belt at all. And so a lot of people were like, we'll do something small. So I did something small instead of that idea. But that idea changed. And when I rewrote it, I was doing exactly what you were just kind of cautioning against, which was I was playing it safe. Like, I had very limited references, which felt good. But ultimately what I ended up with was this kind of noir action mystery kind of comic. And it just didn't, when I got done writing it, I didn't care anymore. It just felt like, well, this is fine. Like, it works. It follows all the rules of story structure and all that. Like, by all accounts, this is effective. People will probably enjoy this if they read it, but I just don't care. I've seen this before. This is, a million things are like this. And sure enough, not too long after that, I saw some movie that was basically the exact same plot as my comic. And I was like, well, good, because I don't want to do anything like that. I don't like stupid things like that. I mean, they're not stupid, but even the few little comics that I've put out, I think you could tell, like, I like taking weird things and turning them into something interesting, like, so even with like the Goblins comic, like there's some weird things going on. You got a queen playing a card game, and then there's these goblins that are attacking, but she could, give two shits about it because, it's all going to work out fine for her. And then they're sitting there bickering, doing their thing. Like, there's no plot really. It's like, it's basic A to B. Like, they're trying to blow up the thing, they don't blow up the thing, and they blow up instead. Boom, done. That's it. But it's in that interaction that I found the interest in that. Julie Jupiter, how can you take a boring, mundane job like a meter maid and turn it into something interesting? Well, there's a bank robbery. How does a meter maid solve a bank robbery? Well, she gives them a super ticket with some kind of sci-fi, dude, I don't know, but it's like stupid things like that really get me going, because it's like, well, this is just weird, and I like that.
Exercise too. That's also a good exercise for like anybody who's like stuck on like kind of creating their vision. Some of the most brilliant comics I've read, like David Boring by Daniel Klaus, where he just picks like the most. He literally picked a boring character and then followed him for a while.
That's awesome.
Chris Ware, like the Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid on earth. It's literally the main character is like a loser who is socially awkward and has like this horrible family history. It's like, it's pretty much just going into this guy's life. And he picked a guy that, like, if somebody were walking on the street, would have been the last person you'd pick to focus on. And focuses on weird tics where the guy like wipes his nose and just does weird kind of socially awkward things. And it's one of the most fascinating comics I've ever read. I think picking weird, just pick a character that like you aren't interested in.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be really cool.
Weird combinations. I've always loved that stuff. And I've always loved pairing things together that shouldn't be or don't immediately have a story. Like I wrote a book when I was really young. It was one of the craziest endeavors that I'd ever taken on. It was called Flapjacks and Syrup. I never published it. At the time I was trying to publish it, nobody wanted it because it was weird and it was a different climate then. I could probably publish it now, but I would have to rewrite it because I don't think it would be, the world has changed. It might come off in a different way, but essentially I took the premise of what, I don't know, I had a random thought. I was working at a Barnes & Noble at the time. I had this random thought about, again, a mundane character. And so I was thinking an agoraphobic, obsessive compulsive. So somebody who doesn't want to be outside ever around anybody, who is very particular about the way they control their environment, their life, and those kinds of things. And at the time, like I was kind of dealing with a little bit of that kind of stuff myself, like not full-fledged, but I was relating in a sense, because I was finding myself coming up with these little rituals and stuff and wondering like, well, what is going on with me? Why do I need these things to be so particular to live my life? And so I created this character to explore that. But by all accounts, he was very uninteresting. I mean, like somebody who never leaves the world or leaves to go out into the world to do anything or have any experiences. What do you do with that? And so I thought, well, I'm going to throw him out into the world. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen to a person like that? Losing their apartment, And so that's what happened. And it set him off on this adventure. He meets up with a transvestite prostitute who's essentially like his sage, like his Gandalf, that takes him off into the world and shows him what things are like. And at the time, I had never been to the city or anything. So this was all like me kind of fantasizing about like what urban life was going to be like if I ever moved to the city or something. It was wild and like weird and a lot of fun to write. But then at the end, it had this very like heartfelt kind of theme to it as well, about people in general, and like it just took on this whole other life. It was crazy, and it just started with this oddball premise, and it's just nuts. And it's kind of what I'm doing with Sisyphine Complex now. I remembered that time, and I took my stupid little action story and I threw it out, and I'm like, that's not the kind of story you tell. Tell the story that you tell. It's going to put some people off, and then some people are really going to dig it. I like to think about it like kind of like Rocky Horror or something, where it's like they got a little cult following. They're not breaking the bank. They're not coming up with theme parks for Rocky Horror, but it means something to people, and the people that recognize it. Oh, you like? Oh my God, we're like best friends now because we relate on such a strange little microcosm level because of that movie.
Can you imagine like the late 80s and early 90s if Peter Liard and Peter Eastman had played it normal and safe?
Yeah, right.
Like, so even huge pop cultural phenomenon like are not like usually they don't start safe. Like I think one of the things that made Walking Dead so successful was that it was such a weird kind of off take on a zombie thing, which now, but it's like that was their own kind of spin on it. And like, like I love like this show Hilda on Netflix that my son's like super into. And it's based on these graphic novels that are like, they don't look like any other graphic novels. Like they're these weird stories where it's like, it's got a certain kind of look, but it's definitely its own. And it has things that you've seen before, but like in different contexts and like different kind of adventures in its own little world and stuff. And I guarantee that person wasn't playing it safe when they came up with it, because it just doesn't seem like a safe thing. It was just kind of playing to like, this is the thing, I think inevitably, like you kind of have to be true to the thing you want to do.
Yeah.
Because it just reads flat otherwise. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Whatever this thing is, I believe in it. I love it. Like these characters are special to me now, and they're weird. Some of it is like, I mean, I've even got some flack from some people in my family about some of the things I'm making, and it's like, whatever, don't read it then. Like this thing's happening. And people dig some of the stuff that I'm putting out there, so it's I believe in them. They're like real people to me at this point.
Yeah, man, I can't wait to see more and everything. So, is there anything you want to wrap up with, Mike? Anything that we didn't mention?
Man, we covered everything and then some, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I got nothing more to add.
All right. Let's see. So Josh, where can everyone find you?
All right. You can find me at joshuakimmel.com or quarterlystories.com, and definitely pick up a copy of 2 Stories on amazon.com if you haven't yet. The only reason I'm not trying to advocate for giant corporations, it's just like I'm a book, and Amazon is one of the primary ways people buy books. So I need to appear there if I'm going to reach a larger audience. And so that helps. So if you can, pick up 2 Stories. If you read it and like it, leave a review on Amazon. That helps too. And yeah, that's basically it. You can also find me on Scott's channel every once in a while.
Nice.
And Mike, what about you? Where can everyone find you?
You can go to cisfiendcomplex.com and that'll get you pretty much everywhere else. That's my site. Again, my Patreon. I'm gonna keep plugging that thing. It's very lonely and quiet over there. Come on over, give me some company. Because the more people that come, honestly, the more time that I will spend on it. But I reach out to my patrons. I appreciate them. I love them. But if they don't respond, I get quiet for a little bit. So come on over, say hi. That'll push me. It motivates me, and I'll make more content.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Right? It's Patreon. I don't know.
Yeah. All right, and you can find my work at circworks.com. Also on this channel, I'm back doing the 100 Ways of Making Comics. I'm back doing my
about that. Yeah, that's so exciting. You're gonna bring.
I'm back doing my comic book because it's been a while. So,
that's
but
cool.
I figured, I can't keep putting it off. So, so I'm excited. I'm just in the writing stages and it's starting to come together. But I'll have more on the next update. So yeah, that's going on. And as far as this show here, what's that?
You been sticking with it?
Am I sticking? Oh yeah, I've been putting an hour a day.
I love it.
Yeah.
I've so far been trying to keep up with you, and I'm on the same day. But give me crap if I don't make it.
Like, Josh, you're doing it. You do it no matter what.
Like that's the thing. The one thing people always underestimate about the hundreds, and Scott's doing it now, and he's doing more videos. So check out his videos on it, because the entertaining thing to watch is like, it is weird. Like, even if you're doing it daily, like let's say you work a job that's like 60 hours a week, you still usually have like one day where you don't work. And it is a weird thing to do anything every single day for 100 days straight.
Yeah, it is.
Working out. And so that is one of the big parts of that challenge is like, so that's the part that, you gotta hold me to, Scott.
Yeah. It's a good thing. And my girlfriend's doing her 100 days of just writing her novel too. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
it's in-house motivation as well.
Yeah, so we sometimes we do it together. Sometimes I do it first thing when I try to do it first thing when I get up, but
Nice.
So it just depends. But yeah, I've been sticking to it an hour a day. So yeah, and things are starting to click, and I'm happy with what I got so far. So it's just the beginning is the hardest part, because especially when you're doing videos, because there's not a whole lot to show with the writing. It takes till you get to at least get to like thumbnailing and stuff like that. So there's something interesting to show. And there's this particular book, there's gonna be a lot of spoilers and stuff. So I got to avoid what to show, what I want to show, and all that stuff. But you'll find more about that if you stay tuned to this channel. And then other than that, the Artcasters, we do the show every single week, unless, well, we took a couple of breaks off for the holidays, but typically we do this every single week, and it kind of bounces back and forth between Josh's channel and my channel. We typically have a different guest on every week. Today it's Mike, next week it'll be somebody else. But if you want to know what's going on, what channel it's going to be on, what time it's going to be on, what day it's going to be on, who the guest is, join our mailing list. There's a link in the description of this video. Just click on that and subscribe. We don't spam you or anything like that. Just usually 30 minutes before we go live, we'll send out an email, and then you can find out who the guest is and when we're going to go live and all that stuff. And you can join us. Join us in the chat. We had a pretty lively chat here, so I want to thank everyone in the chat. Thanks for showing up, and we will see you guys next week. Later.